As AI makes it easier to fake who we are online through deepfakes, voice cloning, and impersonation, the question of digital identity is getting harder to ignore. And Utah is taking a different approach, one that puts individual autonomy and privacy at the center. Today, I'm joined by Chris Bramwell, Utah's Chief Privacy Officer, to talk about the state's work on a state-endorsed digital identity and what it could mean for trust, privacy, and the future of life online. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris.
Well, thanks for having me here, Stacy.
So I understand last year there was Senate Bill 260 that passed, laying the groundwork for this Digital Identity Bill of Rights. And yesterday you had Senate Bill 275 that authorizes the move forward of study that became public. Can you tell us about what that means for the future of this Digital Identity Bill of Rights?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to talk about what does the future mean, we probably need to talk about a little bit about what's the past. What is even digital identity? In Utah, we have a privacy commission that's actually been working on this topic for about 4 years now. And we have specific privacy commissioners that are experts in the digital identity space. And so we've spent about 4 years educating legislators and the public and stakeholder groups on the value of digital identity from a privacy perspective. Obviously, I'm the state's chief privacy officer, and my goal is to empower individuals to control their own data. And the future of privacy, it's not so much about people not having your data, but it's nobody being able to impersonate you when your data has been breached, and you get to control how you present who you are to the world, both digitally and physically. And so last year, the legislature passed SB 260, and that authorized the Department of Government Operations, my office, Office of Data Privacy, and the Division of Technology Services to spend the last year researching, can we actually do digital identity in a way that aligns with constitutional rights and the values of Utah. And those values we prioritized above all others was privacy, individual control, parents being the ones that are in control of their children's identity until they reach adulthood, and minimum government involvement with no surveillance. And so we actually spent the last year not just all over Utah doing town halls, talking with experts, traveling around the country, and even international engagements and engagements with federal partners to learn, one, what is the current state of technology, what's happening around the world, which is not really good when you look at some of the models out there that are contrary to our values. And then we had to delve in really deep on the tech to say, can this even be done? And so that's what we brought forth to the legislature. And then Senate Bill 275, which was introduced yesterday, authorizes us to move forward to actually create what is meant to be a disruptive digital identity model that aligns with exactly what SB 260 laid out and does it within the constraints of a digital identity bill of rights included in SB 275.
And as you move forward with this, what do you anticipate are your next steps? What are you going to be doing immediately with the data that you've gathered?
Yeah, so the data we've gathered, it's all just informative data. Obviously, we're not collecting individuals' personal data, but SB 275 allows us to actually implement the program. And so the Digital Identity Bill of Rights creates the constraints of these are things we have to operate within. And then now we have to go and actually build what this looks like. How do you issue individuals a state-endorsed digital identity that they control and then can go out and use in the world? So we're doing a lot of engagement with private sector. We're in meetings with a lot of the big tech companies. In the bill, it has requirements for healthcare to be able to accept it. So you should be able to take your digital identity and engage with any of your healthcare providers to prove who you are. Even governmental entities need to be able to accept it. And the intent of it is shift control to the individual. So as we do this work now, if this bill were to pass, we'll spend the next few years building out the program and getting this embedded in government as a way to kind of flip the script, as Senator Cullimore says, to put individuals in control and not have government or big tech being the ones in control of your identity.
How has this been received with businesses that you've talked to and other government identities? And I understand Utah is kind of really unique in pursuing this concept.
Yeah, I think we've done a great job of aligning interests. There's a lot of value that comes from digital identity. One, From an American perspective, giving individuals control, that's a core American value. That's why we're even in Utah. Pioneers came here to be left alone and live how they want to live. So you should have that in the digital space. But businesses like it as well too, because it's going to strengthen, in our view, the free market. And that's because when you engage in transactions with companies, it's a one-to-one transaction. You're engaging of your free will with this company of their free will, and we're helping to eliminate the middleman and third parties that currently track or surveil or profile what you're doing in the digital space. We're also eliminating a lot of risk or mitigating it. So right now, fraud is a major issue, not just in government, but in the private sector. And those are costs that get passed down to either companies or to consumers. And so fraud, because your data has been breached and people can use it to impersonate you to get loans or obtain services. You have fraud now with age verification or age assurance laws of people trying to circumvent that. We see what's happened in Minnesota, which is a fraud and impersonation problem. So the benefit of what we're doing is significant, and Utah is the only state putting forth a comprehensive model that is not short-sighted, but trying to do it the right way and provide the mechanisms that the free market can use, what we're viewing as critical public infrastructure. So it's very well received, but it's going to take time. We need to work with them, and they need to understand how to use it as well.
What is the timeline expectancy for being able to implement this idea?
From a proof of concept perspective, we actually plan to have initial proof of technical concept here in the next 4 to 6 months. So this is for security testing, demos that we're doing with other states. Utah, if you're not aware, we held our first SETI summit in October. We had 12 states come, and so we're in the process of forming a consortium with other states to work on this model together. We're going to meet again in April. So we hope to demo the technology there with vendors we're already partnering with, and it's using open standards and protocols, so anybody should be able to engage in the ecosystem. And then our hope is that within a year to 18 months, you could actually have the first state-endorsed digital identity credentials that are issued that individuals fully control. And then obviously in the bill, government and healthcare providers would need to accept them, but then the market will need to play its role to build out its infrastructure, which takes time.
When people hear digital identity, oftentimes they think about surveillance and people tracking them. So what is Utah doing differently to make privacy the starting point?
Yeah, great question. One, I want to acknowledge those are valid concerns with what we're seeing around the world. European models are building their digital identity systems to track and to surveil. That's their prerogative as their government. In China, that is a very similar approach. It's antithesis to what we should be doing in America. So in Utah, Senate Bill 260 outlaid our principles and requirements that there should be no surveillance and there could be no tracking by government. And then they assigned it the work to design this program within the Department of Government Operations, which requires my office and my role as Chief Privacy Officer to be heavily involved, and the state's Chief Technology Officer. And so we had the mandate to design it and come forward with something that can do this. And the legislature actually said in the bill last year, the program cannot be authorized unless it meets these requirements. And then we come back and prove it, and then they'll authorize it. So that is actually what we've done. And so all the way down from the protocol level of how will the technology function through the public policy, that's been carried over into Senate Bill 275 this year of how it must function. And with that buttress of that digital identity Bill of Rights to make sure it's not just in law, but now you have these identity Bill of Rights that this is how it must operate, and government must hold to that going forward as this becomes part of government bureaucracy.
So it sounds like you've really thought through everything as you're telling me, from, just understanding principles and values. How long did it take for you and your team to come up with some of these ideas to push this idea of the digital identity?
I would actually say, it's not just my team. We have dozens of stakeholders from industry. It's been very unique. We like to be very collaborative, but the majority of our stakeholders are not in government. They are private citizens, and some are technical, some are policy, some have total distrust of digital identity. Some of the feedback has come from big tech of just the reality of what does it take to roll it out. it has been a learning experience as we've all brought our concerns to the table and what we want the government and world to look like 10 years from now if digital identity is done right versus the path it's on, which is probably the wrong path. And then from that work, we just put together what we thought was the best recommendations in public policy. And I think the bill reflects that. And so it's a consensus bill, not that it has consensus support from the legislature, which I think it will. Last year, SB 260 was unanimously passed, but it has consensus support from stakeholders that normally are against this. One example I'll give is actually the National ACLU. They came out a few months ago and said Utah is the only state having the digital identity discussion in the right way because we're doing it publicly. We're having discussions in public meetings with elected officials and making it an actual public policy decision instead of it just coming up through administrative functions of the bureaucracy.
And like you mentioned, that will really, I'm sure, be a benefit when it comes time for adaptation, where you have buy-in from all of these different groups and people of different thought. What is the benefit for Utahns and eventually, I would imagine, Americans in pursuing this idea of this digital identity?
Yeah. In the digital space right now, you actually do not know what's real. When you talk to somebody online or even through text message, you don't know that it's actually them. People can spoof phone numbers. People create fake accounts all the time. I've had people create fake accounts of me, or they do it for very common with elderly people. We have individuals scammed all the time by people pretending to be companies. And AI is just making that more prevalent. It is very easy to impersonate and very difficult for individuals to discern who or what is true. And so first and foremost, the ability now, if there's a digital identity and you can cryptographically now prove you are you, and you know somebody is that who they say they are or the entity they say they are, the benefits of that are profound and how you can engage in the digital world. And then you can build off of that. You know, parents will be empowered now. You don't need to scan faces to prove you're an age. A parent should be in control of their child's digital identity. And you should be able to say, I authorize them to use these sites or not use these sites. Some other examples I want to give is think of cybersecurity. The most common threat or the most common vector for breaches right now is just lost and stolen credentials. There's a compromise of credentials, and then people can log in on systems using your credentials, pretending they're you. They have access to these shared secrets. And so with the way that we're building digital identity is it's resilient over your lifetime. So even if your digital identity is compromised, which you have to assume it will be, anybody who says they're immune to cyber threats, you know, it's a lie. So we assume compromise and are building the system to be resilient. So when it happens, you can actually reclaim your digital identity. And even if somebody had possession of what we call the old key, they can't use it. Nobody will trust it because you have reclaimed it and now have the new one. And so the value of this is huge. Compromises, as we know it, should be very different, not based off of your accounts being compromised. And then your benefit to engage with companies. In the bill, it has healthcare providers have to accept it. So when you go to one healthcare provider and you now have another one that you're going to, you can better control that relationship, and you can allow them to know who you are between these different providers to make it easier for your data to be shared under your terms, or for you to have control of it and share it with these entities. So those are just a few examples, but it's profound for individuals. But from a national perspective, we're thinking a lot about, too, of what would digital identity look like in an American model. We actually had the U.S. State Department reached out. They attended a session. We gave a keynote out back in the fall, and then we met with them after, and they said, well, we're the only state talking about digital identity as a constitutional model. And they've been asked to bring recommendations to the UN and to other countries of what's the American approach to digital identity. And so we have really focused in designing SETI to say, what are those constitutional values and how do you build digital identity so it's actually an export of freedom to the world? You know, we don't want people to be surveilled. We don't want people to be tracked. And most importantly, we don't want to infringe on people's agency. That's what profiling does. If somebody tracks everything about you and they do predictive analytics, it can be used to influence your behavior and your agency. And that doesn't align with Utah values, definitely not, but not American values as well. So we're we are intentionally being disruptive to say, let's put something different out there, and maybe we can actually impact the world.
Well, Chris Bramwell, Chief Privacy Officer for the state of Utah, thank you so much for being here and walking us through this Bill of Rights, and I hope that it is, we'll keep track of it as it goes through the legislature this session. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.